guys, and welcome to my channel. Let's talk about August. Yes, what I read in August. So August was a pretty good reading month for me, which was weird because it didn't feel like a good reading month, but it was. I actually ended up reading 22 books last month. Couldn't tell you how. So let's just jump right into it. The first book that I read was The Poppy War. It follows our main character, Ren, when she is about to be sold into marriage by her foster family. She decides to take a placement test to be put into an elite academy, and she ends up placing top in her area. She gets to the academy and she's met with a lot of strife, and she ends up being kind of thrust into this war that she might not have been prepared for. When I read the book, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, but the more I kind of sat on it, the more I saw the issues with the book. The writing was stunning. I read somewhere that R.F. Kuang wrote this when she was 19, which, knowing that, it's an extraordinary book, but objectively it has some issues. Namely, our main character was very weird. Her decision making was very weird, and it was very hard to grasp her mindset and why she was doing the things that she was doing. She reminded me kind of a YA character shoved into a very, very adult situation, but she wasn't written with any sort of development into like that adult mindset. She stayed with the mindset that she had. And I found that all of the characters, it was really hard for me to understand their decisions, and a lot of the decisions that they made like made me angry, and for that I just could not give it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was The Honey Don't List. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I found this to be more of a women's fiction than a romance, which I feel is how this is peddled. I think that Christina Lauren, they're trying to go more for the women's fiction, addressing more hard-hitting topics than their romance start, I guess. And that's all well and good, but if this wasn't peddled as a romance, I think it would have done it a much better justice. It's a dual POV story, and our female main character has worked with this family that is essentially like an HGTV couple. If you don't know what that means, they basically fix up houses and like remodel them, redecorate them, and things like that on television. And the couple has now written like a marriage book, basically like a self-help for marriage. But their marriage is falling apart. They can't be in the same room. There's infidelity. There's a list of issues that they have, but they're supposed to go on tour for this book. So our female main character, who has worked with the Trips for about 10 years now as their assistant, as the female Trip assistant, is tasked with going on the tour with them, as well as our male main character, who originally kind of took the job as the engineer. He wanted to kind of be in the back lines, you know, designing things and things like that, but he ended up being the male Trip, I don't remember what his name is, his assistant, and so he's also tasked with going on this tour with them and kind of keeping the peace between the couple. And then a romance sparks between our male main character and our female main character. I enjoyed this read. It was quick, I read it in one day, but I really felt like it was more about the development of our female main character, kind of learning to stand up for herself and learning about who she is, who she wants to be, and what she wants out of life, more than the romance. Like I said, this is not necessarily a bad thing, but I wish that it had been peddled more as that than as a romance that is supposed to kind of be like kitschy and cute and fun, because that's just not really what it was. Next, I read Rookie Move, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars. This is essentially just a hockey romance. It follows our heroine and our hero and they work for the same hockey team, I guess. The female is a publicist and the male is obviously on the hockey team. It's a second chance romance. They originally got together when they were kids, and then something happens to our female main character that kind of separates them. I really loved our male main character, Leo. He was very expressive. He was very willing to discuss his feelings, how much he wanted to be with our female main character, how much he kind of was willing to give her the space that she wanted, but also made it obvious that he was very serious and that he had every intention of making it work and doing whatever he had to do. Our female main character was okay. She was kind of annoying. One thing that really kind of annoyed me about her, and this is like a very minor thing, is she constantly talked about, like, one, how much she ate all the time, and two, like, how fast her metabolism is, which is like basically implying that she stays super skinny even though she eats all the time, which she's an athlete as well. Like, she works out and you see that in the story, but it's just weird and kind of annoying how much they talk about it. But that's not really the reason that I gave it 3 stars. Overall, I just really found the plot kind of boring and it was very repetitive, but I still liked the romance between the two. Then I read A Song Below Water and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book. It's a dual POV story about 2 sisters, one who is a siren and one who doesn't really know what she is. They're teenagers in high school, and when there is a murder trial going on because a guy murdered his girlfriend, there is an uproar because there's speculation that the girlfriend was actually a siren. And in this world, sirens kind of have to hide their powers, and it's essentially assumed that because she might have been a siren, that is a justification for her being murdered. And one of our female main characters is a siren, and so when one of her favorite content creators comes out and says, I'm a siren as well and I want to use my voice to uplift other sirens and speak about the injustices that are happening, she has to grapple with whether she wants to stay in the dark about who she is or if she wants to come forward and fight for equality. And then our other main character spends really the whole story trying to find out who she is. She doesn't know who her dad is. She knows that there's something weird going on with her, but she doesn't know what exactly. And there's also some weird stuff going on in this town. People are kind of showing up. They're being found frozen in, like, as a statue. And so they're also trying to figure out what is going on. If that sounds like it's a lot in a plot, it is, but it is so good. And it had so many facets of the story that were just so entertaining. I wasn't expecting to be as drawn into the story as I was. The sister dynamic was great. There is heavy discussion into sisterhood and, you know, how important it is to have people that back you and who care about you and want to see you succeed and work with you. Topics of identity and whether you want to stand up for yourself or stay hidden in the shadows. And it was perfection. It was so good. I followed that up by reading Love Boat Taipei, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, so the story is about a Taiwanese girl whose family sends her to this academy in Taiwan to reconnect with her heritage or her ancestry. And she finds out basically that this school is all about finding a significant other and then, like, going back home and getting married, basically. And so it's like this party and there's very little supervision and you can really kind of do whatever you want and there aren't any repercussions. And so she has to kind of grapple with who she is, what she wants, and what she wants in relation to the expectations of her family. She wants to be a dancer. Her family wants her to be a doctor or a lawyer, and she doesn't want that. And so she kind of has to navigate her feelings of wanting something that her family doesn't want her to be, but also wanting to kind of meet her parents' expectations and do right by her family. And that all sounds great. That sounds heartfelt. It sounds fun, a little dramatic with the, you know, party school. But the problem with that I found with this is that it tried to tackle a lot of very hard-hitting topics, but it didn't leave any room for discussion. There was talk about domestic abuse, there was talk about bullying, there was talk about revenge porn, there was depression, suicidal ideation, codependency. There was a lot, and none of it was handled well or left room for discussion. It was never really addressed. It was never really handled in, I felt, any conclusive way. It never, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it very much just brought them up as like plot devices, but never addressed it or tried to start a conversation about these things. And then, oh my gosh, I just like read a really, really good book, and then I just got slapped with back-to-back bad books. And it's like a recurring theme in this month. So then I read A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is the third book and the right now conclusion to the Court of Thorns and Roses series. And I gave it 2 stars. Everything about this book was bad. The second book was the peak of this series, and I think you'll find a lot of people that agree. The third book, the writing was horrid. I feel like Sarah J. Maas discovered M dashes and then proceeded to use 100 of them every single page, and I don't feel like that's an exaggeration. Her plot, where was the plot? Because I couldn't see it. All the characters that developed and grew through the first and second, really the second book, all that went out the window. They behaved as if they hadn't grown at all, and the ending was so bad, like, that's all I'm gonna say, because and then next I read the volume 2 of Sweetness and Lightning. Okay, so this manga is basically about a high school teacher who lost his wife. He has a young girl, a young child. He doesn't know how to cook, and so there is a high school student that he is a teacher of that has a restaurant. Her mom has a restaurant, and so they start cooking together, and you can see where I'm going with this. I'm not here for it. I don't like that. That's uncomfy. I'm not interested. So I'm just going to stop reading this manga series. And then I read Ghost Squad, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. It is a super cute middle grade ghost Halloween-y spooky story about 2 girls who have to go on this quest to save the ghost in their town. There is this bad thing that's happening that's making all of the ghosts kind of lose their ability to stay around, and it was mega cute. That's all I can say. Is if you're looking for like a Halloween-y spooky story, I would highly recommend picking this up. It is so cute. I then read With the Fire on High, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Honestly, Elizabeth Acevedo could give me the alphabet and I probably would read it and I would give it 5 stars. And if she read the audiobook for it, I would fangirl, because her writing is so exceptional. And this story is about a girl who, she's a teen mom and she loves cooking. Her dream is to become a chef, but she kind of feels like that's not realistic. But when her school has an elective class with cooking that has the possibility of going to France in the school year, she decides that she wants to take the class, knowing that she probably won't have the money to go on the trip, but she wants to take the class anyways. And this is such an endearing story. I really like that we had conversations of teen motherhood, single motherhood, the stigma around teen pregnancy, and just a lot of different discussions, but it mainly focused on this young girl's dream, and it was just so heartwarming. There is the relationship that sparks with her and this new boy, and it was really sweet, and I loved it. I loved it so much. And then next I read tome 1 of the Vinland Saga manga. It's about Vikings. This is the story of Thorfinn, whose father gets murdered by a band of mercenaries. When his father gets murdered, he gets captured by these mercenaries. And so he's working with them, but while he's working with them, he's training to get better and to kill the leader of the band. I gave the first one 5 out of 5 stars. I already knew the story behind the anime, behind the manga, so I kind of already knew going in, but this is a very dark manga. The main character is between the ages, I would say, of 12 and 15, but as you can imagine, they're Vikings, and if you know anything about Vikings, then you'll know that it has a lot of very dark topics, so just keep that in mind if you want to go in to this manga, but it's really, really good. I love the story and I cannot wait to read more. I then read A Darker Shade of Magic, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. I had really high hopes for this, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, which is good, but it really was like a 3 out of 5 stars. I gave it 4 because the world building and the magic system I felt like was fantastic. I will continue the series just for those 2 things alone, but the characters were very one-dimensional in my opinion, and the plot was very slow. It's essentially the story of 2 characters, one male and one female, who get brought together by this magical artifact. And one of them is an Antari, which is basically a one-of-a-kind. There's only, I believe they said, 2 of him. It's either two or 4 of him left. And they can travel between the different dimensions. So there is the gray London, the black London, the white London, and the red London. Some of them have varying levels of magic. Some of them don't have any at all. And black London is basically destitute. No one goes there. It has been walled off. Like, it's a bad place. And he can travel to the different Londons. And when he kind of gets thrown together with our female main character with this magical artifact, they go on an adventure to bring it back, and they have some people that are trying to also get this artifact. I didn't really see a difference between all of the side characters. The side characters really all felt the same. I also really felt like our main characters were very archetypal characters, very stereotypical, and I didn't really feel any connection to them, so I didn't really love it. That being said, like I said, I will continue, and I've heard that the second one gets better as far as character development, so I look forward to continuing. Next, I read Destiny's Embrace, which is a historical romance that I gave 3 out of 5 stars. This was my first Beverly Jenkins. I'm not a huge historical romance reader, but I wanted to give it a shot, and I figured that Beverly Jenkins was a great place to start. I really liked the story. It tells the story of 2 main characters, our hero and our heroine. Our hero he runs his family's ranch, and our heroine is a housekeeper that is hired to keep his house, I guess, and a romance sparks between them. I thought it was cute, but it wasn't anything like exceptional. It wasn't spectacular, it wasn't groundbreaking. It was just the stereotypical kind of like grumpy versus feisty character. The male main character didn't want her there. She kind of just was like, I'm gonna be here, I need a job, deal with it. So of course a romance starts. It got to the L word very quickly, within, I would say, a week, and it was just okay. Next, Next, I read Black Girl Unlimited, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Part memoir, part fiction. It tells the story of Echo Brown, who is a young girl living in a world that has magic. She has magic specifically. She's a wizard, and so is her mom, and she's kind of just living her life, and that's really what the story is about, like her just living as a wizard in I believe she's in Cleveland. It was so good. This handled a lot of really heavy topics: drug addiction, sexual assault, sexism, racism, just so many good just conversations. And I'm not doing it justice because I can't explain how good it was. Like I just loved it so much, and I want everyone to read it. So if you haven't read it already, read it. If you don't feel like I'm selling it for you, go read Goodreads reviews because it's just so good. It's so good. Like you get me? Good. And then to follow that up, I read A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars. I really did not like this story. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and our female main character gets taken from, I think it's like New York, to this fantasy world, and she's trying to help the king of this place break a curse. Like, it's Beauty and the Beast. It was real bad. The characters were very flat. The world building was very flat. The plot was very slow. The writing was okay. It just wasn't good. Like, it just wasn't good. I didn't like it. Oh, it's very popular. A lot of people like it. I did not. So next, I read Monday's Not Coming, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So I kind of went into the story with a different impression than what it was. I kind of thought it was going to be like a murder mystery situation, but really it tells the story of Claudia, whose best friend Monday has gone missing, and she doesn't know where she is, and everyone kind of seems to brush it off, and her family's not really, like, they don't seem to want to help, so she kind of is lost. And she was really close with Monday, but as the story goes on, she's dealing with a lot of grief, very confused. She is having to deal with living without this person that she was really close with almost her entire life. And she's also dealing with learning that Monday might have had some secrets and might not have exactly been the person that she thought that she was. Like I said, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really loved the story. It didn't end up really being a murder mystery, but I still really liked the topic. Like, I liked the discussion of grief and kind of the toll that it can take on someone. I did not like the seemingly unnecessary time skips. So it's broken up into the before, the after, but it also has chapters that are like the before, like 2 years before, etc. And you find out what that is. You can kind of assume that it's one thing. You find out what it is, and it really doesn't lend itself to the story. Like, it doesn't help. I don't think it makes a difference. I get the purpose behind it. I get why it's in there, but I don't think that it could, I don't think it helps the story in any way. And I also kind of felt that the second reveal was very needed as well. So when you find out what happened to Monday, it feels very stark and very abrupt in the context of the story. The feeling of the book is very much like this sadness, but also a lot of confusion and just being kind of lost and not knowing who you are and kind of how to continue living and how to be without this person that you spent your whole life with. And the ending just felt it didn't go with the rest of the story. It felt very much like a punch and just very abrupt, and it didn't fit kind of with this running theme of the rest of the story. And to follow that up, I read 3 Dark Crowns, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars. This is the story of 3 sisters who want the crown, want to be queen. And they each specialize in certain types of magics. One is an elemental, one's a naturalist, one's a poisoner. And they're essentially training to kill their two sisters at the end and take the crown, which sounds awesome. That idea sounds so interesting. It sounds like a great setup for a story, and it wasn't at all. The characters were plug and play, like to the max. I could have taken one sister and replaced her with the other sister and it wouldn't have made a difference. I oftentimes forgot who the sisters were, oftentimes mixed them up, and the plot was so weirdly paced. Nothing happened until the last 70 pages, and this book is almost, if not over, 400 pages, and it was just terribly, terribly paced. And the ending was so much of a setup for the second book that I'm genuinely angry about it. Like, I'm so mad that I wasted my time reading 400 pages of a setup for the second book when you could have condensed the first book down to make maybe 100 pages and added it to the second book and been perfectly fine. Like, I'm genuinely angry that I spent my time reading that much for that story. Not to mention the romance. There's like a love triangle, and I hate it. One leg of it specifically, to the point where when this leg of the love triangle, anytime it showed itself on the page, I skipped the page. I rolled my eyes, I groaned, I hated every single bit of it. I did not like it. I will not be continuing the series. Just no. Okay. And then I read Happiness, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So this is like a manga about vampires. It's only volume 1, so it was enough to keep me intrigued, but it wasn't anything spectacular. It's about a boy who gets attacked by a vampire and then he becomes a vampire. The art is stunning. It's gorgeous. There's a scene when he has to take some DVDs back to like a Blockbuster or something, and he's riding his bike and the vampire attacks him and like chomps down on his neck, and he's laying on the ground with like rain coming down on him, and he's like, I have to return my DVD. But it's just a really mediocre start to a story, and I am excited to pick up the second volume and see kind of how it progresses. Then I read Quileute, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. It is the, I want to say, 4th book. It's either the 3rd or 4th book in Penelope Douglas's Devil's Night series, and it follows Damon and Winter. Listen, I hated Damon the entire first 2 books. I think it's 2 books. I had no idea how Penelope Douglas was gonna redeem him. I had no idea how she was gonna make me want him to be happy, and she's a genius because they're now my favorite couple, like, of the season, of the series. I loved it so much. I was rooting for them by the end, and I just had the best time. Like, I loved it. I did knock off a star because, like, once the conflict, I was just kind of bored, and it kind of like took me a while to get through the conflict. You have not checked out Penelope Douglas. I don't know what you're doing. You need to do it right now. All of her books are free. Almost all of her books are free on Kindle Unlimited. Do yourself a favor because perfection. And then I read Conclave, which is like a novella between Quileute and the next book that just came out. And I didn't rate it because the main couple in the story was Erica and Michael, who I don't really like. They're not my favorite couple, so it just kind of was like, eh. It was only 88 pages, I think, so it was really short, but it just not, I don't really like them a whole lot. We are getting to the end. So then I read Let Me Hear a Rhyme, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This is the story of 3 friends who just lost their friend slash brother, and the deceased's dream was to become a rapper. And kind of to memorialize him, they decided that they are going to put a collection of all of his songs together, create an album, kind of convince people that he is still alive, and make him big, make him famous. And it was just really, really good. It's set in the 90s and has this like Brooklyn 90s vibe. There's a lot of that like 90s like hip hop culture, and it was really nice. This is the same author that wrote Monday's Not Coming, and I loved the vibes of this one, I think, more. Tiffany D. Jackson does 2 things that I really, really like. Her characters are very believable. She tends to write, from what I've seen of the 2 books that I've read, she tends to write young adults, so teenagers, and they're very believably teenager. They think like a teenager, make decisions like a teenager, and so it's easy to kind of like understand their motives and why they're doing the things that they're doing. And she also very much includes a lot of Black history into the place that the story takes place. There's always one character or a character somewhere in the story that is familiar with the history of that area, which I really like, because it's a lot of times it's a piece of history that might not be very well known, and it kind of gives a backdrop and a feeling of how people feel about their community. So I really like those 2 aspects of her story. I think they make them very believable and easy to kind of feel what these kids are feeling. But also this one just had a very nice sense of hope to it. Monday Is Not Coming has kind of this confusion, but also like this looming feeling of grief and like heartache, but this one had a lot of hope. And these kids really wanted to memorialize and do right by this person that was so influential and so big in their lives. And it was just really, really good. I personally read this book physically, but I think an audiobook would probably be the best route. There are raps in this story, and so I think an audiobook would just be a great way to consume the story. Then I read Kingdom of Souls, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This is the story of a girl who comes from a family of witch doctors, but she doesn't have any powers of her own. When children start going missing in her village, she decides that she is going to trade years of her life for magic. This story was so much. The synopsis really happens within, I would say, by 200 pages, that is resolved. Like, you know that storyline. And then it just becomes so much more. The things that I really liked about this story was the world building and the magic system, but I didn't really like the pacing at all, and I didn't really like the characters. I didn't dislike the characters, they just felt very one-dimensional. The pacing was very weird. I think that there was a lot in this story that was trying to be packed into 480 pages. It was just too much. It was too much that I really feel like you either could have added an additional 200 pages, or you could have carried this over into another book. I know this is part of a series, but it just was too much, and the pacing was very odd at places. It was slow to start and it died off, and was very much of a slog to get through, kind of towards the like 300 page mark, and it felt like a lot. I don't know if I will continue. Like I said, the world building and the magic system kind of gave it the 4 stars, like kind of with a darker shade of magic, but it was just too much. And the last book that I read this month was, I'm gonna put a clip of me reacting to finishing this book so that you can understand my feelings. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. My enjoyment gave it a 3. Objectively, this is a 2. Our female main character was incredibly boring. I felt like she was a brick wall. She was incredibly naive, and she made the dumbest decisions. I wanted to strangle her. The romance was predictable, bland, didn't like the main character, the love interest, and the world building was very flimsy. I kind of was expecting grandeur, gorgeous landscapes, these magical tents, and the writing was very lacking. The world building and the writing behind it was just very flat. The description was very bad, and I just couldn't picture the world. It just wasn't it. So that is all of the books that I read in August. I had a really great month as far as the amount of books that I read. Not too great with the quality of the books, which is fine. I have had some months where I just like killed it. There were really great books. So I can have a month where there's some bad ones. But yeah, I hope you guys liked this video. Make sure you comment down below what books you read this month and your thoughts on the books that I read. I'd love to chat about it. But I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks so much.